urgent. Orban has been publicly trampled. Dirty games before the elections have turned into a catastrophe. The Hungarian Prime Minister is already packing his bags. The end of Orban and his entourage. A harsh reckoning is already being prepared for him. Trump has been humiliated before the whole world. Power is being torn from the hands of a madman. The American leader is one step away from the abyss. Washington has risen up. The White House is being seized by force. Russia is burning from within. The dictator has gone too far. Russian assault troops have called to overthrow the bunker tyrant. Moscow has plunged into chaos from which Putin can no longer escape. Even the regime's loyal dogs are furious. A stab in the back is being prepared in the bunker. Shock alliance. Turkey and Syria are preparing a steel fist for the Ukrainian armed forces. This is not just diplomacy, it's a military coup on the front lines. Kyiv's new allies are ready to burst into battle. Are they really preparing to finish off the remnants of the Russian army? All this and more in our upcoming report. Hotspot. Orban's fiasco. The dirty lie against Ukraine has been exposed. On the eve of the decisive battle for power, the Hungarian Prime Minister took a desperate step, but his cunning plan failed. Belgrade publicly humiliated Budapest. Orban has never experienced such disgrace before. The countdown has begun. The Hungarian Prime Minister is already packing his bags. Details in the report. The countdown has started. But
if these elections remain relatively free, there is a high probability that the opposition party for Respect and Freedom, known by its Hungarian abbreviation TAISA, which is currently leading in the polls by a double-digit margin, will be able to win the election.
There is less than a week left before the elections in Hungary, and the political temperature in the country is rising.
If Prime Minister Orban resorts to authoritarian measures to stay in power, then the likelihood that for the first time in the European Union elections will be rigged is also quite high.
And yet another provocation in Viktor Orban's election campaign. On Sunday, the still acting Prime Minister announced an alleged sabotage being prepared in Serbia against the gas pipeline, through which Russian gas is supplied to Hungary. And he hinted at possible foreign involvement, of course, casting accusations at Ukraine. Moreover, Putin's friend even convened a meeting of the National Security Council.
When the Ukrainians blocked Russian gas that was coming through Ukraine, we were able to put this pipeline into operation and increase its capacity. Even though we are under a Ukrainian gas blockade, we are still able to supply Hungary with gas and accordingly with energy. That is why this pipeline is so important. It is an umbilical cord. If it is cut, the Hungarian economy will come to a halt.
Now, once again, the election campaign has already entered its emotional phase. Here they are working with meanings and emotions. And considering that Russian political strategists try to or always impose on their client, let's put that in quotes.
According to Serbian authorities, backpacks containing explosives and detonators were indeed found in the Kanyushi area near the Turkish Stream pipeline, just a few hundred meters from the facility. However, the coincidence of these statements with the final week of Hungary's election campaign is already causing a noticeable political stir. Belgrade has not found any evidence of a Ukrainian connection in the attempted sabotage of the main gas pipeline.
The disinformation suggests that the Serbian army and its personnel will be working for a third party by finding Ukrainian explosives and blaming Ukraine for it. This is not true. The manufacturer of the explosives is not necessarily the perpetrator or the instigator. Someone might now say that perhaps at this moment it is beneficial for the United States of America.
An interesting statement was made by the head of the Ukrainian GUR, Kirilo Budanov. According to him, the current political arrangements have an expiration date.
Nothing lasts forever, neither the government in Hungary nor the current situation that has developed.
Tisa, when she wins, or rather if she wins at all, she won't win by such a landslide that Orban would simply be thrown out of the political community. He will continue to try to promote his interests. I'll tell you more. When a party of the Orban style is defeated by some other party, more liberal forces. If after that, over their 4 or 5 years, they don't prove themselves worthy enough, then someone like Orban comes back because people start to feel nostalgic. Things were better under him, and so on. That's why, honestly, they'll still have plenty of chances for a comeback, and that's still the case now. This will continue to be a risk factor. Even if Tisa does win, we shouldn't forget that the trend toward division and so on is still ongoing, and that the Russian Federation has strong positions there, and that the enemy is not sleeping, and we have to constantly fight against them.
Because Muscovy will continue to poison the lives of its neighbors, both through disinformation and by intimidating Europeans. And perhaps it will even go further and risk opening new theaters of military operations, for example, against the Baltic countries.
Against the backdrop of global destabilization in the world, he may feel less constrained and start acting even more aggressively than he does now.
On April 12th, we will find out whether the Hungarian people can change the country's political course and avoid repeating the Orban era. You let Ukrainians in, but you don't stand next to the Germans. Ukrainians, you want to rule, but you don't want to bring Ukrainians into Ukraine. That's the rule. So far, the preliminary ratings speak for themselves. And for now, the current prime ministers are entering the most turbulent phase of their political careers. And so, it should not be forgotten that even in the event of a change of power, this will only mark the beginning for the Hungarian people in their struggle for a European future. Madness in the White House. Trump has completely lost it. The President of the United States has crossed a line beyond which lies only political oblivion. Even his allies are horrified by Trump's behavior. The word impeachment is echoing on Capitol Hill. This is the end game. Democrats and Republicans are joining forces to stop the madman. See the details.
Following the publication of these highly obscene statements and aggressive threats on various social media platforms, a number of American politicians responded with a sense of alarm and questioned the mental state of US President Donald Trump.
Open the F straight, you crazy bastards, or are you going to live in hell?
Former Republican Congresswoman and loyal Trump ally Marjorie Taylor Greene criticized the president's policy on X, where she wrote that Trump has simply lost his mind.
The strait is closed because the US and Israel have started an unprovoked war against Iran, based on the same nuclear lies they've been spreading for decades. On the claim that Iran could develop nuclear weapons at any moment. You know who actually has nuclear weapons? Israel does. They are more than capable of defending themselves without the US fighting for them. They killed innocent people and children and paid for it. Trump's threats to bomb power plants and bridges are harming the Iranian people. The very same people whom Trump claimed he was liberating.
Taylor Greene had been loyal to Trump for many years, but in June of last year, she criticized the strikes on Iran. She stated that this was a departure from the campaign promise to put America first and avoid costly wars abroad. After the resignation of Attorney General Pam Bondi, Trump is planning major cabinet reshuffles as he becomes increasingly frustrated with the political consequences of the war with Iran. Reuters reports this, citing its sources in the White House.
Any potential reshuffles could serve as a reset for the White House ahead of a challenging political period. The 5-week war has led to rising gasoline prices, a decline in Trump's approval rating, and increased concerns about the consequences for Republicans ahead of the November midterm elections. Reuters?
He believes that his decisions are perfect, correct? The lack of results is not due to bad decisions, but to sabotage. People are undermining him. He wants to fire Tulsi Gabbard as head of national intelligence because he doesn't like the intelligence reports. He doesn't like that they're pessimistic because he's telling one story, but it turns out the intelligence says the Strait of Hormuz won't be unblocked anytime soon.
Several sources report that Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence in the Trump administration, and Howard Lutnick, the Secretary of Commerce, are among those who could potentially be dismissed. But this is only because they speak the truth and simply don't agree with what Trump is proposing. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer claims that what Trump writes resembles the rantings of a deranged madman.
He threatens to commit war crimes and alienates our allies. That is his nature, but it is not ours. Our country deserves much better.
Trump promised isolationism in America, pledged to end foreign policy conflicts, and to focus on domestic renewal. Instead, he has brought global issues to the forefront, from threats to Greenland to starting a war with Iran. Now his policies have led to the US losing allies.
It's like in school, like some bully saying, either do this or I'll beat you up, call you names and hit you on the head. And since Trump has always been like that his whole life, even back in school, and it worked for him, and it worked for him in the White House too, he decided it would work on a global level as well. At first, the Europeans couldn't figure out what the Americans' intention was, what the plan was, where beneath these layers of idiocy, the real policy was hidden.
Trump's behavior and manner of communication are leading to him having fewer and fewer supporters, even among those closest to him. He does not accept it. Another point of view is only possible if it matches his own and in no other way. Many politicians and analysts say that from a strategic point of view, Virosran has failed. And all of this could even lead to the impeachment of Donald Trump.
The Kremlin is falling, Putin is being driven out in disgrace. The countdown for the Kremlin dictator has begun. Even the loyal dogs and tame propagandists are furious. The rats are officially starting to flee the sinking ship called Russia. The collapse of the regime. Who among his closest circle will stab him in the back first? Watch. Putin's ratings have started to decline.
What happened? Why is all this happening?
In just 1 week, the share of Russians who tend to trust the president dropped by 5% and over the month by 9%. Even the propaganda media are writing about this.
Everything is going according to plan. According to plan, just according to plan.
The Remeslo effect has worked. He launched the idea into the information space that it's time for Russians to rise up against the Putin regime. So,
you see what's happening right now? There is complete chaos and confusion going on. That is, I already see clear signs of the system's impending collapse.
people do not want to see united Russia in power, deliberately engaging in falsifications that Durov himself has loudly exposed. He commented under a poll on a Z-bloggers channel where 80,000 people voted for United Russia, but he wrote that 90% of them are bots.
Indeed, the overwhelming majority of votes for United Russia, about 90% in this poll, were added by bots from exotic countries. The bots have been blocked, but the votes have not yet been deleted. Work is underway on additional features to combat bots in polls.
We need to fight not only against bots, but also against the Kremlin's talking heads.
Everything is going according to plan.
Russian bloggers now openly say the special military operation is failing the plan Putin claims.
The 5th year of the special military operation. Kyiv in 3 days.
The assault troops are already declaring war on the Kremlin, realizing that they are expendable, while officials and their families are living their best lives. The 13th are complaining that the Ministry of Defense is lying, talking about conspiracy theories.
While our soldiers are dying, they are over there. They're showing off their visas to the Americans, chatting about the spirit of anchorage. These are deliberate criminal orders aimed at grinding down our army in a war that they seem to be deliberately dragging out.
Russians who signed contracts have realized that they made a deal with the devil for a war with no end.
It's impossible to quit the army here, to leave the armed forces, no matter how much anyone might want to. And why are we being treated like scum, like the lowest of the low? I have a big question about that.
The Kremlin, in collusion with the Ministry of Defense, has condemned its own people to eternal slavery under fire. The propaganda stays silent. Solovyov blames the West. Simonian claims Ukraine will be defeated in 3 days. Meanwhile, ports and oil refineries are burning all across Russia.
No one is talking about what just happened in Ust-Luga and Primorsk. In reality, about the scale of destruction caused by Ukrainian drones. Silence.
Even Kalashnikov now admits that the Ukrainian armed forces are winning the war and Russia is taking heavier and heavier losses.
Well, these are the rather grim events. You see, even without drones, they are massing forces, which of course I was afraid would happen with the Ukrainian armed forces, and now it has. These are the ports through which petroleum products are exported. Ust-Luga and Primorsk in the Leningrad region, these have been struck. As Reuters reported, both Primorsk and Ust-Luga have halted their operations. This is a very heavy blow to our economy and budget.
Oil exports from the Russian Federation plummeted by 40% immediately after the strike on the ports in the Leningrad region. The Kremlin is running out of funds for the war, and there is nowhere to get them from.
It's the 5th year of Ukraine's demilitarization, and yet their drones, you see, keep coming and striking.
While the good drones of the Ukrainian armed forces are destroying military-industrial plants and fuel depots all over Russia, at the front, Russian commanders are personally helping to finish off the world's second army. We
Still don't have a unified registry of personnel. I don't mean in terms of payments, although there are plenty of issues with payments too, but in terms of, for example, when a person signs a contract, when they undergo training, how many days, which unit, when they were killed, went missing, and so on. He disappeared. Or let's say there is still no information about him, but he is listed as if he were an active soldier and someone is receiving money for him.
Another Z-blogger, Maxim Klimov, complains about the chaos in Putin's army. There is complete lawlessness and corruption, and salaries are allocated from the budget that feed the command staff.
Nothing has been done regarding documentary support, organizing searches, and so on.
There is no trust, only anger. While some are at the front, their relatives are being robbed.
So, buddy, go to war, fight for us, and in the meantime, your sister and mother, left without you, with their only cow that provides them with food, will break into their yard and kill their cow right in front of them.
More than 30,000 people have signed a collective complaint against the slaughter of animals addressed to Putin and the government of the Russian Federation.
I think it's time for all of us, the people, to unite somehow and figure things out and to make the authorities understand that. If things keep going this way, then frankly, the authorities themselves don't have much time left. No amount of blockades or police will save them from this. In
Russia, the outbreak of foot and mouth disease began as early as February. It is an extremely contagious and dangerous disease for animals. The authorities are carefully concealing the facts about the epidemic in order to avoid a ban on meat exports to other countries, using the alleged collusion of the West as a cover.
The Anglo-Saxons certainly do not like our country. And I understand that from their side, we can expect any kind of treachery of any sort. And in order to prevent the disease from appearing here in Sverdlovsk Oblast, though we understand that it is possible that it could be brought in. After all, no one has yet explained to us how all of a sudden outbreaks of the disease appeared so evenly across the country.
Even the staunch patriot Kashevarova understands that something's up.
The situation is getting worse every day. Every step is wrong and looks like a mockery of the people. Soon they will force us to film videos. Thanks for blocking, Telegram, and disconnecting the connection. With gratitude for the exorbitant taxes. With gratitude for the recycling fee. With gratitude for bringing in migrants and providing them with apartments. Donetsk. Lugansk. Get ready to give thanks for water that isn't there. Zaporizhzhia, you will be grateful for the property seized in favor of the governor's people. To thank for the money stolen during the construction of fortifications. Let's be grateful that we haven't been jailed or killed yet. In
cities across Russia, people have already taken to the streets to protest the effective blocking of messengers and the slowdown. But the security forces managed to disperse the crowd, but it seems this is only the beginning. The trigger has already been pulled. Ahead, Russia faces a difficult and dangerous year in 2026. Putin's regime is falling, and the security forces can no longer help suppress the people's anger.
Kyiv is entering the Middle East, a triple alliance, Ukraine, Syria, Turkey. Zelensky in Damascus has nullified Putin's influence. A secret defense pact has been signed. Syria is ready to adopt Ukrainian technologies for destroying occupiers, and Turkey acts as the guarantor of the mega alliance. This is the final chord in the geopolitical execution of Russia's ambitions. See the details.
Russia is losing the Middle East. Zelensky in Syria. Ukraine is taking over influence in these regions.
Syria is a country where Russia has dominated for years. Military bases, political influence, and control over the region.
Two 22 M3 aircraft flew from a Russian airfield to the Khmeimim airbase.
Against this backdrop, an unexpected visit. Volodymyr Zelensky visits Syria for the first time and meets with the Syrian leader.
This step is so significant, the arrival of President Zelensky in Syria, that the Kremlin still doesn't know how to comment on it. In my opinion, this tells us that the Kremlin is so stunned by this.
But that's not all. In Damascus, in addition to the bilateral meeting, there was also a trilateral one involving Ukraine, Syria, and Turkey.
President Zelensky flew to Syria on a Turkish plane together with Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. And the day before, there was an unannounced visit to Istanbul. And what did they discuss there with Erdogan? And why did Turkey help organize this visit to Syria? Well, this is just a nightmare and a horror. In my opinion, this is simply absolute panic inside the Kremlin. That's what happened because of this.
The key focus
is national security and safety, the overall economic stability, and as well as this process requires a high level of effective cooperation and seamless collaboration between all the different parties involved in the project. Ukraine
offers its military experience primarily in fighting drones and missiles gained in the war with Russia.
This is the emergence of Ukraine as an independent player in the Middle East in general. In the extremely challenging and complex geopolitical situation that developed after the initial outbreak of the armed conflict, between the United States, Israel, and Iran, when Iran began launching its Shahed suicide drones in all possible directions. Ukraine's experience has become so in demand, and suddenly Ukraine, I'm not afraid to say it, bursts onto the international arms trade market.
And just as importantly, Russia was discussed as well. Are secret talks against Putin really being discussed between Kyiv and Damascus? Or are these just scary stories being invented in Moscow itself?
The Kremlin itself may understand that the story with any dictator, including Putin, can turn out to be quite similar. That when things start to heat up, it turns out that no one wants to support that dictator. And gaining a deep understanding of exactly what mechanisms are used for this, and the precise way it unfolds through every single step of the process, such a detailed story can not only cause a massive amount of distress for the Kremlin, but it could literally frighten them to their core.
But the Kremlin is already reacting negatively. Ukrainian trips to Middle Eastern countries are being called useless.
Terrible, just terrible. Well, terrible, but not.
The Kremlin has become more active in several directions. For their own people, they say that these Ukrainian trips mean nothing. And to the Gulf countries, they claim that Ukraine is useless and that only the Kremlin can help them. But what is the reason for such activity?
They are simply afraid of losing their influence in the Middle East for good. In reality, they've already lost it. Because the fact is, when it comes to Iran, they not only haven't helped, but they can't help at all. Once again, Putin has demonstrated that he is incapable of doing anything. And of course, after that, what influence do they have in the Middle East? Well, practically none at all. But
Zelensky has clearly and boldly entered Putin's territory. Just recall the president's trip to the United Arab Emirates, March 28th. One could imagine Putin's fury. How could this be? Russia and the Emirates are best friends.
Your Highness, dear friend, I am glad to see you again in Moscow. And I would like to warmly welcome both you and your distinguished delegation. And
these are no longer just random visits, this is a strategy. Ukraine is building a network of contacts in the Middle East. From Saudi Arabia, where agreements have already been signed, to Syria, where only words will remain of Russia's influence.
It's a strategy, and it's quite powerful because it is about actively working to successfully persuade and win over those various neutral and unaligned countries that had declared their neutrality in the context of the Russian-Ukrainian war. And
while Russia is preoccupied with the war in Ukraine, Kyiv is playing a broader game. And it seems this cannot help but affect the master of the Kremlin.
It's obvious that personal contact, a visit at such a high level, is much more effective than just some phone call, especially with such a strange person who is absolutely inconsistent and illogical. A slow-witted person, basically, like Putin. Of course, this greatly worries the Kremlin, just as it is concerned about its influence in the world and specifically in the Middle Eastern region.
But for Ukraine, such visits have their own advantages. And it's not just about reducing Russia's influence on the countries of the Middle East and the Persian Gulf, but more about personal achievements.
Accordingly, I would say, this unexpected tour across Middle Eastern countries establishes an entirely fresh set of strategic challenges and effectively places Ukraine in a new position. Not to ask for money, not to ask for weapons, but rather to seek out those who are ready to share their experience in resisting dictatorship.
And this is actually quite a bold and strategic move by Ukraine to actively take on these significant new positions in the region.
The Middle East is a region where Russia has traditionally tried to maintain its influence. But will it succeed now? After all, Ukraine is becoming increasingly active in the region, and this series of visits is just the beginning. Kyiv is starting to play a new geopolitical game, leaving Russia behind as usual, further and further away. Lukashenko has been backed into a corner, and Minsk has given up Putin's secret plan. The whole truth about the Belarusian defense industry has come out. Minsk can no longer hide the Kremlin's bloody secrets. These insider revelations are truly shocking. The masks are off. Without this support, Putin's war would collapse and sink in just a few hours. Watch for all the details. The Kremlin's main satellite has once again come under fire for its loyalty to its big brother.
President Putin has no relationship with anyone like he does with Belarus. That's only natural. We are allies.
Of course, it's only natural because Lukashenko has no other choice but to serve Putin faithfully and loyally. It's no secret that since the start of the full-scale invasion, Belarus has become the Kremlin's main ally. There are simply no closer ties between these countries than in military affairs. Although Lukashenko denies this at every opportunity and claims that he is against the war.
We are absolutely and firmly against the war, especially our dedicated officers and all of our brave soldiers.
But not against helping the Kremlin dictator. In fact, the Belarusian defense industry has shifted to a war footing. Since 2024, Belarus has been supplying Russia with chassis for the production of Panzer S-1 anti-aircraft missile and gun systems. The deliveries involve upgraded platforms with armored cabins. They are used in the new version of the system. This was reported in an investigation by Belpol.
Further evidence of this can be found in a formal letter from the joint stock company Shipunov Instrument Design Bureau, which was specifically addressed to the first Deputy General Director of the company, Mr. Golovachev. And this official document explicitly states that, in strict accordance and compliance with the government contract under the State Defense Order, MZKT-79 chassis are to be manufactured and supplied directly to the Russian Instrument Design Bureau for their use. 30,312 for combat vehicles. Panzer S in batches of 6 units each in June, July, and August 2024.
So, we're not talking about export models or newer modifications, but about an adapted version of the Panzer for the Russian army. It is likely that part of the contract has already been fulfilled, and the equipment is being used in the war against Ukraine.
The Panzer S-1 surface-to-air missile system essentially turns into a stationary installation which can easily be destroyed by Ukrainian strike weapons. Accordingly, the medium-range surface-to-air missile system covers key logistical and transportation facilities of the Russian Federation, forms the layered air defense system around Moscow and the Moscow region, and this is primarily the Panzer S-1. According to
the publication, the switch to a Belarusian chassis is intended to eliminate the technical shortcomings of the previous version.
This situation involves the strategic deployment of the Panzer air defense systems. Furthermore, it is important to note that various European partners continue to maintain a presence at the military-industrial complex enterprises located throughout the Russian Federation. Consequently, a significant external factor influencing these developments is the ongoing series of precision strikes being carried out by Ukrainian drones against these critical locations. The coup at Russian military-industrial complex enterprises is involved in the production of air defense and missile defense systems.
The Belarusian defense industry is essentially working to meet the needs of the Russian aggressor, in addition to supplying hardware, armored vehicles from storage, and weapons for regular units. Belarus has turned its factories into serial production centers for the Russian army.
The Belarusian military-industrial complex supplies the Russian Federation with components. About 80% of the exports from Belarusian defense enterprises go to the occupying country. Therefore, this is just one episode. The military-industrial complex of the Republic of Belarus is currently involved in major repairs of armored vehicles and the production of artillery shells. Accordingly, pilot training is also being conducted at the Grodno base.
Lukashenko is trying to satisfy Putin's appetites without directly entering the war, understanding that this could cost him his position. For him, demonstrative loyalty to the Kremlin is a way to survive and maintain control over the country without participating in open hostilities.
The foundation of Lukashenko's policy is the retention of his personal regime and the transfer of power by inheritance. Therefore, accordingly, positioned at the very heart of his foreign policy strategic orientation is the concept of the balance of power. That is to say, it is a deliberate effort to satisfy all the key players on the world stage. Moreover, I would like to note that it is the People's Republic of China that views the Republic of Belarus as a springboard for military political advancement on the European continent.
But will Lukashenko be able to play these roles in the long run? The self-proclaimed dictator is already looking for reliable partners, apart from Moscow.
Shock. Putin is going all in. Insider information has exploded online. Russia is preparing a large-scale offensive. Secret orders have already been signed in the Kremlin offices. But Ukraine is ready to meet the enemy with a steel fist. A bloody fiasco is already being predicted from Moscow. Kyiv in 3 days 2.0, or the complete destruction of the Russian Federation. Watch. Russia is preparing for a new offensive in Ukraine. According to Bloomberg, the Kremlin is considering the scenario of a prolonged war for another 1 to 2 years.
The Russian authorities essentially, as of today, are not ready to accept the fact that the war in Ukraine is in reality lost. And even the so-called ephemeral goals of the so-called special military operation that the Putin regime set for itself, they have not even been achieved by 50%. Despite this,
in the US, they state that there is still a chance for dialogue, but the positions of the sides remain far apart. At the same time, peace negotiations have essentially reached a dead end, since Russia is demanding concessions and Ukraine refuses to accept them. But the main question is not Russia's intention, but its capability. Here, the outlook for Russia is much less optimistic. Ukrainian forces have built a so-called drone wall, which destroys most assault groups before they even reach the front line. In principle,
as of today, Russia cannot achieve anything on the battlefield in Ukraine. Any significant results in matters of, for example, operational, tactical, or even strategic importance. Therefore, of course, it can now be stated that there is a serious detachment from reality within the Russian military political leadership and a plunge into some completely separate parallel reality and corresponding perception of events.
The pace of the offensive is minimal. In some places, Russian troops advanced only 15 meters per day. This is an anti-record for more than a century of modern world wars. Not to mention, the anti-record since the start of the full-scale invasion? Analysts are also noting a general slowdown. In March, the Russian army captured only 23 square kilometers, which is several times less than at the beginning of the year.
In January, 319 square kilometers. In February, 123 square kilometers. In March, 23 square kilometers.
Among the reasons are the counter-offensive actions of the Ukrainian armed forces and Russia's own internal problems. For example, disruptions in communications and restricted access to key technologies. Moreover, in certain areas, the Russians are not advancing but retreating. In particular, Ukrainian forces are gradually pushing them out of the Kupiansk direction.
Russia wants to continue the war, and that's a fact. They still hope that their spring-summer offensive campaign in 2026 will yield certain results, which for them could be, for example, a turning point. But that's unlikely, since the initial phase itself, which began in the second half of March, has completely failed. Right now, we are seeing a high rate of Russian troop losses on the battlefield, while at the same time, one of the lowest rates of Ukrainian territory being captured.
However, the rise in oil prices may temporarily strengthen the Russian budget and provide resources to continue the war. In addition, the Kremlin is preparing society for a new wave of mobilization.
For the first time since 2023, Ukraine has moved to systematic counterattacking actions. Not a counteroffensive, but specifically limited counterattacks. These are tactical in nature and since January 27th have been successful. More than 480 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory have been liberated, which exceeds the amount of territory captured by Russian forces over the same period.
Despite preparations for an offensive, Russia is facing reality, slow progress, losses, and Ukraine's effective defense. And it is precisely this reality that may become the main limitation on the Kremlin's plans. That's all for now. For more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.